Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. This is Gary Abraham, Managing Director of Aspect Real Estate Partners. And Aspect Real Estate Partners is a commercial real estate brokerage company located in Irvine. Our clients include income property investors, developers, tenants, and landlords. Joining me today are Billy Rosenberg, founder and president of Infinity Residential Property Management, Mike Dunn from Coldwell Banker Platinum Properties, and Max Sabino, also from Aspect Real Estate Partners. Billy Rosenberg is the founder and president of Infinity Residential, operating in Southern California, primarily in Orange County and LA. Prior to starting Infinity Residential 5 years ago, Billy spent 6 years with the Irvine Company Apartment Communities and earned his MBA from the Paul Merage School of Business at UC Irvine. Mike Dunn has been a licensed real estate agent for 22 years and specializes in residential sales and leasing in Orange County, California. Mike is also an investor in a foreclosure group which purchases properties at the courthouse, rehabs them, and flips them. They average around 45 flips a year. He is also a real estate investor and owns 9 rental units in 4 states. Mike has sold over 800 homes and leased over 300 homes. Wow. Max Sabino is an associate at Aspect Real Estate Partners. Max will share with us a current analysis and some slides of the Orange County multifamily market that includes residential properties that have 4 or more units. But today we're going to have a conversation about the impact of the pandemic and what it's meant to owners of 1 to 4 residential unit investment properties. There are many investors out there who own income producing residential properties but are not otherwise active in commercial real estate and have less access to market trends and strategies at this time. So we've asked Billy and Mike to help us out because they're experts in this area. And we really don't operate with 1 to 4 units, commercial real estate. Typically multifamily, we look at 4 units or more. So I'm going to start out with Billy. And there's been a lot of concern, we've seen in the market on rent collections. And, when the pandemic hit in March, people were worried about what's it going to look like in April, what's it going to look like in May, what's it going to look like in June. And we've been monitoring that, but again, really not for units of 1 to 4, whether they're single family homes or a condo or something like that. So Billy, what are rent collections for April, May, and June compared to last year?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Gary. So, normally in a typical year, including last year in these same months, we operate at, an eviction rate of below 1%. So even though we are having some people with late rents, once we manage those and, get people to pay rent, it's going to be a very low number. So our single family portfolio is 202 units, primarily in Orange County. And, we have maybe 2 people sent to eviction on a monthly basis. And that rang true for April, May, and June of last year. This year, we're up to about 3.5%. So definitely a little bit of an increase because of the COVID-19 rent deferral requests, but nothing as large as we expected. And the majority of those are in our units that are a little bit less rent. So we're seeing a trend there. And so far in June, we're still a little early in the month, but we'll probably know in about a week how June is shaping out.
All right, so June looks good so far. You see it as being about the same as May, or am I reading too much into that?
Well, we actually had the largest number of deferral requests in April. That's kind of when this thing first happened, and when the executive orders came down from Governor Newsom. So a lot of people that were struggling financially, they knew about this executive order and they started asking about the rent deferral program right out of the gate. Anyone that was interested in deferring rent, we did our best to remind them this is rent deferral and not rent forgiveness. And reminding people that even if you're not going to pay your full rent or a portion of your rent, this is going to have to be paid back in the 6 months following the lifting of the executive order. And I think that was a good way of us convincing people to really just reduce their rental payments by what they had to and not looking at this as a free month's rent or, an opportunity. I would say 60% of the people that inquired about it then ended up just paying the rent. The remaining people that did participate in the program, they had to decide before their April rent payment was made what their payment schedule was going to be. So we had them complete a form that said, hey, we're going to, for example, defer 50% of rent for April and May, and then we'll make that up in a 6-month prorate beginning on August 1st or July 1st. And once we get that signed, then they kind of have to stick to that. So we had the most in April because people took advantage of the program in April. And then we had some people still trickling in May that, hey, we're financially not doing great. So they got signed up in May. And we haven't had anyone request to start that program for this month. So yeah, we had a total of 10 people that deferred rent out of our 202 single family units.
Wow. Okay. So that's better than I think most everybody would have guessed would have been the situation by now.
Absolutely.
All right. So with that, what are asking rents compared to this time last year? Are we seeing a reduction in asking rents?
So I did a quick just analysis of our current vacancies because we haven't really calculated market rent of all of our properties that are currently occupied because just no point in doing that. But asking rents are up 2% year over year. Normally we're closer to 4 or 5%. So that's a dip, but we're still up. So that's a positive.
Yeah.
And I think leasing took a big hit the first 2 to 3 weeks of COVID, but then people that needed to move still needed to move. So you kind of saw it pick up and the market was not any looky-loos, it was people that really needed a place. So we're definitely able to get a lot of leases done the last couple of months.
Gotcha. Do you see, you mentioned, getting leases done, and I know you manage a lot of different property types and locations. Do you see any variation depending upon the unit type and total rent? In other words, is it a 1-bedroom, 1-bath unit in one location versus a single family home in a different location? Do you see any differences there?
Yeah, so in terms of, getting rent up, and we have these discussions with our property owners. So as a property management company, we are providing our recommendations for what, market rent should be to all of our clients. Our clients then approve those, talk it through with us. It's a collaboration effort with all of our property owner clients. And, for the higher end stuff, the single family, we're recommending let's get it up 3-4%. And most oftentimes our clients are agreeing with us on those numbers. But what we've seen for some of our, $2,000 a month rentals, 1-bedrooms, condos, even some of our multifamily portfolio, our clients are leaning more towards, let's not even send out lease renewals. Let's just let their leases roll into month to month. We don't want to rock the boat during this time. And then we can always, go for renewal increases when this thing kind of blows over a little bit. So that's kind of been a strategy that's worked for us. We haven't had many people move out. Normally we don't let people go to month. We want to get those lease terms locked in.
Right.
But right now we're in the middle of summer. Even if there was some people that were to take advantage of that and give us a notice to vacate without being ready for it, we're able to handle that because this is peak leasing season.
Right. Well, that's good info. And along, considering who the viewers of this webinar are, we wanted to find out, how would you advise if they're not using a professional property management company like yours? How would you advise them if they have a tenant who is asking for a rent reduction or rent, abatement or something like that? How would you advise them?
Yeah, so I guess I would give the same advice that we are giving to our employees who are taking these calls right now. The first step is to hear their story, really find out what's going on, because I think it really is a case-by-case basis how we're treating these rent deferral requests. Once you determine that these are people in need, we're requesting proof, and it is part of the executive order. You have to request for proof that their financial difficulties are related. So we're getting letters from employers that state their hours have been reduced or that they've been terminated from a job, bank statements, anything we can get to kind of prove that it is a COVID-related financial shortfall. Once we have that proof, then we kind of almost have financial discussion with them and remind them that this is rent deferral, not rent forgiveness. And there's no more important bill out of the 20 to 25 monthly bills that you have than your rent. And you got to keep shelter over your head. So as you're looking through your budget, maybe you spend less on the credit card. Maybe you push back your car payment. Last thing you want to do is put your home payment in jeopardy, because shelter is number one. So once talking that through with people, I think that really helps give them, a sense of the magnitude of this decision to do rent deferral, because as soon as the executive order is listed, this money is going to have to be paid back. So once we kind of come to a number with them, we're really pushing people away from doing full rent deferrals of the entire rental amount and instead doing partial payments. And then those payments get prorated over a 6-month period once the executive order is lifted. And we have a legal team that we've talked this all through with to make sure that everything is in line with the executive order, and they created a form for us. And if there's anyone on this webinar that wants to reach out to me, we can send this form over to them to help them out. And they can actually fill out on that form, this is how much rent we are going to be deferring over the next 1, 2 to 3 months. This is the amount that we're paying back on top of the monthly rent following the lifting of the executive order, and getting that signed by both parties. So then if the contract at any point is defaulted on by the renter, we could send them straight to legal for eviction. And we're not constantly going back and forth and, well, this didn't work out like we wanted it to, the job didn't come back. As tough as these conversations can be with tenants, because eviction is not a fun thing to talk about. And we have to look out for the best interest of our clients, and that's staying true to the executive order, but also making sure that we are able to hold a firm line.
Yeah. That's good info there. I'm learning a lot. So I think you touched on this already, but it doesn't sound like you're renewing leases and bumping rents on the renewal. It sounds like you're just going month to month. But again, to the other owners out there that are managing the properties themselves, it sounds like you wouldn't recommend any increase, certainly during this time.
Yeah, and it just depends the type of property. So if you have a tenant that always pays on the 30th, the month before, and is always on time, and you haven't even heard a word from them during this COVID-19 pandemic, and rents come in on the 30th, the last 3 months, and the renewal's coming up, I would consider doing an increase. They're probably not as affected, and this is a lease renewal that's going to take place for the next 12 to 18 months. It's not fair to the client to only think about these next few months of the pandemic, and you want to get your rental increases up. If you're feeling like maybe morally you don't want to raise someone right now, or if you think that they have been affected and you don't want to push your luck with this tenant and risk vacancy loss, yeah, it's a good move to let it roll into month to month. This way you haven't offered them a 12-month lease at the same rate, so you can still increase that once this blows over, and you're not even rocking the boat. A lot of times when people get lease renewal offers, that reminds them, oh, do I want to keep living here or not? And once that thought comes into play, sometimes people move. So by letting it roll into month to month, you just kind of, keep the status quo going during this hectic time.
Got it. Have you had any, in the properties that you manage, are there any maintenance delays that you've seen? You're maintaining your own properties cause, employees that don't want to come in or can't come in because of the lockdown? Any maintenance issues?
The only maintenance delays, those first 2 to 3 weeks, residents were a little tentative to put in maintenance requests because they weren't comfortable with, maintenance technician coming in their home. But right now we're really just right back to normal. I think people have kind of gotten over the initial extreme fear that this brought. And if your dishwasher's not working, you got to get it fixed. So in terms of our employees, no, everyone at our company is so, grateful that we are part of this workforce that is needed right now, and that we all have jobs and that business is good. So everyone on our team is doing a great job. We definitely have made safety a priority, and everyone's wearing masks and social distancing. We're calling the residents before we go in, and making sure that they're aware someone's coming into their property. So if they want to leave during that time, they can give us permission to enter, and just being extra careful, cautious, and aware of how other people are feeling during this time. But no, maintenance goes on.
Got it. What about for tenants? You know, you always will have some vacancies, just normal vacancies. What about the tenants that you're screening now that are coming in? Are you seeing any changes, generally speaking, in their credit history or financial history, or is it similar to before COVID?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know if I have enough data to really make an accurate statement on that. But just what I've noticed is we've been getting a lot of very qualified renters. Maybe that's because we are letting our, less expensive rentals roll in month to month, and our higher stuff is available. So that always leads usually to better credit applications when a rental property is $5,000 a month plus. And also a lot of the looky-loos are not out there right now. So it's people that are really needing to move and need deals. So they have their financial applications ready. And yeah, we haven't had too many issues approving leases over the last couple months.
Got it. And final question for you. How can an owner, if they don't have a property management company or a realtor helping them find a tenant, how would an owner know, like I used to do, on my own, that they're not taking advantage of the situation, or the tenant coming in and then not going to pay rent? You can't kick me out,
Yeah, so we definitely have some people that take advantage of the situation. We've had people, we had a guy that's under eviction before this all happened, and since the courts closed, we haven't been able to process an eviction. He's still just living in that apartment. So there's been a couple misfortunate situations that are kind of out of our hands. But I would just advise, don't take it personal. I think that's what happens a lot to owners who self-manage their properties. There's this personal factor, and being the professionalism that a property management company brings, and kind of the distance from it being personal, gives us an advantage. And I would just kind of tell the property owners to think about that. And it's not about assessing if they're taking advantage. It's about understanding the rules of the executive order, and then offering circumstances that are within those rules, but then not bending once those rules pass over. So we had someone that signed their form agreeing to make certain payments on certain dates. 3 days after they didn't make that payment when they said they would, we're sending them to legal we're sending them a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit, and then to our legal team, because that was the deal. So people are going to take advantage, but it's just about understanding the rules to this executive order as best as you can. So they're only taking advantage of the opportunity and not advantage of you as the property owner.
Got it. Well, thank you. And thanks, Billy, for joining us and your expertise. And please stay on. We're going to ask some questions of Mike right now. And as I mentioned before, Mike's been a realtor specializing in higher end residential properties. In fact, Mike sold us our house, and that's our first introduction to him. But he's been active in Irvine and Newport Beach for a long time, and he knows this area quite well. So, Mike, first question: have you seen an impact on pricing on residential investment properties as a realtor?
In the 550,000 to 800,000 range, it's still really active. So I haven't seen a change there. In the higher end, I have, because the numbers sometimes don't work on the rents versus the price. So like $1.5 million and above, it's dropped a little bit as far as investors go. The cap rate doesn't work for a lot of investors in that price range, especially in the Orange County area. So yeah, I'd say the 550 to 800,000 range, there's multiple offers on those properties.
Okay. And then similar, to some of the questions I asked Billy earlier, but because I know you manage some of these investment properties that you sold to investors over the years. Have you seen or heard of any of these higher end houses, tenants asking for relief?
Well, actually, one of my own rental properties in Irvine, the wife is a physician, but she's a cosmetic surgeon. So that was, they couldn't do any surgeries during this COVID issue. So they called me and said, Mike, are you willing to reduce the rent for a while? And I did. I gave them a rent reduction, and then with the understanding, as Billy mentioned, that they will make it up later. On one particular pool property that's probably worth around $2 million, one of the tenants lost their job, so they immediately stopped paying rent and didn't give us a reason why, other than just stating in their email that due to COVID, we can't afford the rent. So I asked them to give us proof. And about a month later, they had their employer send me something that said his job has been reduced. So I explained to them that they needed to give that to me within 7 days of losing their job. So we gave them a 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. I also put the property on the market, and we're asking $6,500 a month, and I've had 12 applications come in. Wow. On this luxury property. So my feeling is, with a potential second wave of COVID coming, a lot of renters are wanting to hunker down, and they'd rather have kind of a nice pool property or somewhere where they can hang out for a while. So it's very interesting to see the luxury rentals go up in the amount of rents that people are willing to pay. So it all depends on what the schools announce. I think if the schools announce that schools will reopen, you're going to see more people wanting to. Actually, I'm sorry, the reverse. If schools do not open, I think people are going to want to hunker down in a nice rental within the school district because they know they're going to have to be there and they can't go out.
Got it. Yeah, it's interesting. And assuming, like Billy's, you wouldn't be raising rents or advising anybody to raise rents right now, except for maybe the luxury properties.
Yeah, exactly. The whole goal for an investor is to keep cash flow coming in. So if you have even 1 month's worth of vacancy to make up that difference, you might have to charge more than the market is willing to pay. So I always recommend they keep, especially during this time, keep the rent the same. Maybe go month to month, depending on how things go, but at least keep it the same. Make the tenant feel like you're working for them, and they're going to be more loyal to you. And that way you keep your cash flow going on your property.
Mm-hmm. How about vacancy in terms of your clients? You're like Billy, you help your investors find tenants from time to time. Are you seeing any issues in vacancy on these higher end homes?
Yeah, I don't manage as many as Billy does. So on mine, I haven't seen any issues with vacancy. There's one in Laguna Beach that has been vacant for about 2 weeks, but it's only a 1-bedroom. So that's kind of it's a tough rental with only 1 bedroom. If you have 2 bedrooms, it's easier to rent because you can have roommates. So that's the only one we've had an issue with. Most of the ones we rent are 3 bedrooms. On one 3-bedroom, I had 28 people look at it, and we have 9 applications. Wow. Yeah, and that price range is under $4,000 a month. So it all depends on the price range as well.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. Do you think there's the same number of investors in the market looking, or less, or more, or how does that look? People waiting on the side for the opportunity? How does that look?
Yeah, so there's a 90-day moratorium on foreclosures that are with government-insured loans. So I see a lot of investors waiting on the sideline, waiting to see when those come up. If it's a good deal, they'll put in an offer now and take it. But I think you're right. There's a lot of investors waiting on the sideline to see what happens in the next 90 days. Especially with the release of the foreclosures after that moratorium's lifted.
Got it. Let's see here. So we already talked about pricing, I think, a little bit. Do you see any reductions in pricing for residential units or townhomes or condos or anything like that out there? I mean, what's pricing look like generally?
Well, let's say in the Northwood Point, for example, 4-bedroom, about 3,000 square feet, it's come down maybe about 7%, especially if it's not been upgraded, because we're competing with brand new construction in Irvine. A lot of people that are end users, they prefer the brand new bells and whistles. So the older homes that don't have as many upgrades, they're going to have to drop their price a little bit to offset the amount of money that the end user is going to have to put in to upgrade it. So I have seen a little bit of reduction in that $1.2 million to $1.7 million range.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Any other comments you have? I mean, regarding COVID and you or your other realtors out there are talking about anything you're hearing?
Well, the second wave is kind of the big issue. If that does happen, obviously the market's gonna soften up a little bit. However, I did notice that today I think the president is going to sign the new bill that's going to extend the amount of time that employers have to pay their employees, and it may be now I think 60% of that PPP program will have to be paid back.
Right.
So that will probably help things a little bit. For investors, they're probably going to wait and see what happens overall. But the big thing is the interest rates. And this is what I tell buyers is the interest rates are still so low that no matter what's happening around you, you have to look at your monthly payment. If you lock that interest rate in and you can afford the house and you feel confident that you're going to have your employment's not going to be affected, I'd say go ahead and buy, because it's all about those interest rates. So I feel pretty confident, because I think everybody knows this is a one-time deal. Moving forward, we are going to have to be more cognizant of our immune systems, do social distancing, but I think we're all going to adapt to it. But ultimately, it's the interest rate that affects the monthly payment. So if that stays low, I think the market's still going to be pretty good.
Got it. Sounds good. Well, that's the questions I have for you. And we're going to turn now to Max. So Max is going to talk about, as I mentioned in the intro, what the general multifamily market in Orange County looks like. Statistics. These statistics come from CoStar. They have various modeling. They have a lot of great data that they use to feed these models. And so, again, they're just models. But anyway, Max, why don't you talk about what's going on in multifamily in Orange County?
Thank you for the introduction, Gary. So, that was a lot of great info you guys gave, Billy and Mike. I think it directly reflects many of the trends I've been seeing for the multifamily market with 5+ units in Orange County as a whole. And so, one key thing to remember when I'm going through these charts and graphs is that there's a lot of variables, and these graphs, they change every single day. And so as time goes on and we learn more about our current pandemic and the government responds differently, we narrow down these variables and they'll get more and more accurate with these projections. So just keep that in mind as I go through this. So first I want to talk about kind of the sales volume of OC as a whole. You can see right here, sales volume is significantly slowed, which, is no surprise. Landlords and investors, they're trying to navigate the current economic environment, and they've really been sitting on the sidelines for this whole quarter. And so, vacancy, that too has changed significantly. We've seen a significant rise in vacancy, and that was already due to 2 deliveries in the past few months, the Promenade and Broadstone Arden. Both are big 4-star apartment complexes that were delivered in the beginning of January. And so they really artificially inflated the vacancy rate. And then now with the current pandemic, that vacancy is just projected to continue to climb. One thing to know is that what I've seen is renters are considering their best options for moving right now. a lot of people haven't made a move. They're kind of waiting. But once these stay-at-home orders start to get lifted and people figure out what kind of job they have to go back to, that's when we'll see a lot of people consolidating and moving into maybe with their family or roommates in order to save money. And so because of this increased vacancy, we're going to see a decrease in rent, market rent. So right now, the overall market rent has decreased 1%, and it's projected to continue decreasing as management communities look to attract renters. For much of this cycle, rent growth has outpaced income growth, and so that disparity, along with the current pandemic, it's going to further dampen the rent growth. And so here you can see rent growth for studios and 1 bedrooms and even 2 bedrooms are really going to take the biggest hit. Like I said, many people are going to be moving out of those small, expensive units, and they're going to be consolidating with roommates and family into 3-bedroom apartments. And so when you get the increased vacancy, a decrease in rent, that's when you're going to see these changes in the market sale price. So right here on this graph is the market sale price per unit by star rating. And you can see even here, again, the 4 and 5 star, they're going to take the biggest hit because as people consolidate, there's going to also be a migration from the 4 to 5 star down to 1, 2, and 3 star units, all again just to save money. So, I think the biggest overall trends is that this pandemic is still very uncertain. Every projection I've seen so far is thinking that we're going to hit the trough of this downturn come the beginning of 2021. And then from that point forward, I think we'll be on our way out of this economic disaster. But again, these are going to rely on many variables. Will there be a vaccine? What kind of jobs are people going to be able to go back to work to? How is the economy going to change as a result of this virus? And as we keep learning about these variables, these projections will get more and more accurate. But one thing to always remember is multifamily, especially during economic downturns, has always been a true and measured safe investment. It's a very safe long-term investment, especially during downturns. So, I think that's all I have for today. But, again, I want to thank all of you guys for all the great information you've provided here today.
All right. Well, unless anybody has any other questions or comments, I think we'll wrap this up. And I just want to thank again Billy Rosenberg and Mike Dunn for their help in putting this together. There's a lot of great information in here. Certainly, I own investment properties, as does Mike. And as I mentioned, you hear a lot in the news, but it never talks about, well, what about my condo, or what about my investment home, and what do I do? So I think there's a lot of helpful info here from both you guys, and thank you very much for participating today.
Absolutely.